What if I told you that a man's greatest crime wasn't murder, theft, or treason, but the audacity to believe his country could be truly free? January 13th, 1963, Lomé, Togo. In the humid darkness of early morning, gunshots shatter the silence. The first president of Togo lies dead at the gates of the American embassy, barefoot, unarmed, and utterly alone. This wasn't some random act of violence. This was an execution, and the conspiracy behind it reaches far beyond the borders of this tiny West African nation. The question isn't just who pulled the trigger, it's who gave the order and why. To understand why Sylvanus Olympio had to die, we need to go back to when his country was nothing more than a line on a European map. Before World War I, Togo was German territory. Efficient, profitable, perfectly organized for extracting wealth and shipping it back to Europe. But when Germany lost the war, the British took the western slice, France grabbed the east. And that's when the real exploitation began. Brutal taxes, infrastructure built solely to export raw materials, education designed to produce obedient clerks, not leaders. Into this world, on September 6th, 1902, Sylvanus Olympio was born. His family had money. His uncle was a wealthy trader who regularly clashed with colonial authorities. Young Sylvanus was sent to London, to the London School of Economics, where he absorbed dangerous ideas about self-determination and economic independence. After returning to Africa, he became head of Unilever's operations, one of the highest-ranking Africans in a major European company. But even as he climbed the corporate ladder, he was taking notes. In private letters from the 1930s, he denounced the exploitative pricing of African cocoa and cotton, predicting that only Africans controlling their own currencies and trade policies could ever be truly free. By the 1950s, independence movements were spreading across Africa like wildfire. Olympio found himself leading the Committee of Togolese Unity, demanding an end to French rule. But unlike other independence leaders, he advocated for gradual, peaceful transition rather than violent revolution, a strategy that earned him respect and made him even more dangerous to the colonial powers. 1947, Olympio enters politics, forming his independence movement. His message is simple, but terrifying to the French. Real independence, not a rebranded colonial leash. 1956, Togo votes for self-governance. In the French parliament, politicians panic. They're terrified of losing their strategic West African outpost. April 27th, 1960, Togo officially gains independence. 1961, Olympio wins the presidency in a landslide. No military uniform, no grand marshal speeches, just a quiet promise. Schools, roads, and an economy free from French manipulation. But beneath the celebrations, resentment is growing. Hundreds of ex-French soldiers are denied positions in Togo's newly downsized army. Early 1962, Olympio signs his own death warrant. He turns to West Germany for loans and military assistance, effectively giving France the middle finger. French business interests panic. January 13th, 1963, a small group of Togolese ex-soldiers, led by a sergeant named Etienne Gnassingbé Eyadema, storms Olympio's residence. Olympio runs for his life toward the American embassy gates, seeking refuge. He never makes it inside. What was Olympio's real crime? Why did he have to die? It wasn't just his independence, it was his economic defiance. He refused to tie Togo's future to the CFA franc, threatening a system that funneled billions into French coffers. If Togo broke free, other former colonies might follow. The entire French economic empire in Africa could collapse. But Olympio made another fatal mistake. He slashed the size of Togo's army to prevent military coups, leaving hundreds of trained ex-French soldiers jobless and seething. French officials quietly began funneling support to these disaffected men, whispering promises of restored power. Meanwhile, the CIA was watching nervously. Olympio's cautious relationship with Ghana's Nkrumah and his hints at non-alignment smelled like potential Soviet influence. A declassified 1962 CIA memo warned of a dangerous shift in Togo, that if Olympio succeeded, a domino effect could render the entire French West African bloc politically and economically unstable, so the quiet meetings began in embassies, in cafes, in military barracks. Among the bitter, broke ex-soldiers was a young sergeant named Etienne Gnassingbé Eyadema. French intelligence made contact. Money was promised. The green light was subtle but unmistakable. This wasn't a Hollywood-style coup. It was death by whispers, bank transfers, and veiled threats. After Olympio's assassination, the official line from Paris was swift and cold. This was an internal Togolese affair, but the fingerprints of a carefully orchestrated scheme stretched across continents. French intelligence files, many still partially redacted, point to secret meetings between Colonel Maurice Robert, a French intelligence officer, and Togolese dissidents as early as mid-1962. One chilling memo from December 1962 reads, "Olympio's economic nationalism presents an existential threat to French West African stability. Neutralization is advised." The conspiracy didn't end with France. While there's no smoking gun of direct US orders to assassinate Olympio, there's clear evidence of knowledge and tacit approval. Washington feared Olympio might eventually join a bloc with Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Guinea's Sékou Touré, leaders moving dangerously close to Soviet influence. Even West German intelligence knew what was coming. A classified 1962 assessment warned, should Olympio fall, it will be under French orchestration with possible indirect American support. When Olympio was shot at the gates of the US embassy, some claim the American guards were ordered not to intervene, an omission that haunts archival testimonies to this day. French and American newspapers described Olympio as aloof and out of touch, quietly framing him as the architect of his own downfall. Years later, when Eyadema bragged about killing Olympio, boasting that he bought his first pair of shoes with the bounty, Western diplomats looked away. Olympio's death wasn't just a political event, it was an economic reset, a hostile takeover disguised as a coup. Within 48 hours, Nicholas Grunitzky, Olympio's exiled political rival and Paris's preferred moderate, was flown into Lomé on a French military plane. By January 15th, he was installed as president by the same military junta led by Lieutenant Etienne Eyadema. France moved fast. The CFA franc, which Olympio had threatened to abandon, remained firmly in place. French companies, Électricité de France, Total, Compagnie Française de l'Afrique Occidentale, retained their exclusive mining and energy contracts. France's aid package to Togo tripled in the year following Olympio's assassination, not as charity, but as control. What they couldn't win through diplomacy, they bought with bullets. The disgruntled ex-French soldiers who staged the coup. They were rewarded with official positions in the Togolese army, land, pensions, immunity from prosecution. Lieutenant Eyadema, the sergeant who fired the fatal shot, was promoted, first to colonel, then chief of staff. Under Grunitzky, Togo opened its markets. American investment tripled between 1963 and 1965, particularly in phosphates, one of the country's largest exports. In return, a US listening post was quietly established to monitor nearby Ghana, where Nkrumah was growing more radical. Grunitzky's presidency was France's return without uniforms. He signed new economic agreements that bound Togo to French interests, a 50-year port contract with a French shipping conglomerate, a telecom monopoly handed to French telecommunications, massive loans with repayment strings that locked Togo into debt dependence. But his position was never secure, tolerated, until his usefulness faded. In 1967, he was ousted in another military coup by none other than Eyadema himself. He ruled brutally and uninterrupted for 38 years. Olympio died for believing Togo could stand alone. If a leader threatened the post-colonial economic order, they became expendable. His assassination set the playbook for future Western-backed coups across the continent. Togo was reabsorbed into the French economic orbit. The spoils were divided among soldiers, businessmen, and diplomats. And the people? They inherited a flag, but not freedom.